Thanks, Ken Corla. And Ken, I'd like to echo the comments of colleagues on the disgraceful homelessness figures from yesterday. But I wanted to raise, Minister Taoiseach, with you a related matter which also affects the homeless families. As you know, last week the upper floors of the 16-storey Metro Hotel were destroyed by fire. And while residents were made homeless, of course, there was thankfully no loss of life or injuries. And as always, the Dublin Fire Brigade, the Gardaí and the other first responders did an outstanding job. Of course, any serious fire like this, and also the legacy of unsafe and dangerous buildings constructed during the Celtic Tiger, it brings up grave concerns, I think, about fire safety and about the operation of BCAR, which, as you know, as a former minister, is the Building Control Amendment Regulations from March 2014, which essentially continued the system of self-certification of the disastrous, of course, Pádraic Flynn Building Control Regulation of 1990, which permitted so much defective building in this country. As you know, Taoiseach, I myself first alerted the Chief Fire Officer and City Manager to residents' concerns at Priory Hall and estates like Millfield Manor, Longboat Quay, and up to 30 other high-profile defective multi-unit estates across the country, of course, have been highlighted in the media. And you might remember, Taoiseach, in 2007 I continuously raised the issue of pyrite damage to homes and estates in this chamber, but Taoiseachs Ahern and Cowan and Minister Gormley absolutely refused to take responsibility for the often distraught residents. Now, as building at long last begins to ramp up again, will we have more lax and also the changes made by Minister Murphy there beside you to planning and to apartment sizes and so on, will more of this lax BCAR regulations leave another toxic legacy for the future? In Dublin Bay North and specifically, Taoiseach, there are particular concerns about some buildings with timber frame construction. It's alleged that there are gaps at the top of compartment walls, a serious fire hazard, that plasterboards have not been fitted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, that service ducts and intermediate floors are not fire protected, that brickwork and blockwork cladding is not secured to the timber frames. Can the Taoiseach confirm that the Minister for Housing is fully aware of how many homes built during the boom are at risk of a rapid fire spread? Now, he asked the local authorities for information on this recently. I think himself and yourself as Minister and your predecessors have this information. Can he also outline, of course, and you too, Minister Taoiseach, what steps you've taken to ensure the safety of all the residents concerned? From FOI information supplied to my constituency colleague, Councillor Keane O'Callaghan of the Social Democrats, who's done very important work in this area, it appears that the Department of Housing, you have been aware of timber frame, insulation and other fire risks for at least a decade. After the Grenfell tragedy, when I raised the issue of high-rise cladding and mandatory sprinkler system, Minister Murphy told me about the framework review, but the important case study was never published. You also told me in February, Minister Murphy, about the high-level fire safety task force to lead a reappraisal of fire safety in Ireland. And Taoiseach, when will the final report of that be available? We obviously have the building control bill in front of us at the moment, but given the track record of developers, surely the construction industry register shouldn't be placed with them, but with a new independent building regulator. And finally, Taoiseach, a very brief point, despite the Minister's assurances to colleagues in this chamber last week after the Metro Hotel fire, our SIP2 colleagues tell us that the Fire Brigade has no 42-metre ladders and that the only two high-rise appliances they're both based at one location in Tara Street in central Dublin. Thanks, Can.
A lot of questions there, Deputy. Just first of all, in relation to the tenancies that were affected by the fire last week, my understanding is that the individuals and families involved have been accommodated. Although some of that is temporary accommodation in a hotel, they are being provided with financial support, and of course the local authority is looking at trying to put in place long-term tenancies for the individuals concerned. In relation to some of the broader concerns that you have, I think it is important to say that there is an inspection taking place of all local authority multi-storey buildings to ensure that following the Grenfell disaster in the UK, that the report that we're preparing on the back of that in terms of ensuring that there is a full audit of local authority-owned buildings in Ireland is taking place, and we're expecting to get that report back next month. Minister Murphy will confirm that, I'm sure. In relation to some of your more general concerns, the Department of Housing and Local Government is is very aware of the responsibilities that we have to ensure that as a construction sector, particularly around house building and the building of apartment complexes, is rebuilding and delivering significant increased numbers now year on year, that we need to make sure that corners are not being cut and that we are ensuring that we're building safe homes for individuals and families into the future. And of course the Building Control Act sets out the primary purpose for which building regulations may be made, i.e. health, safety and the welfare of people in and around those buildings. The primary responsibility for the compliance with the requirements of the building regulations of course rests with designers, builders and the owners of the buildings. But of course we need to make sure that local authorities have inspection teams and inspection capacity to ensure that those building regulations are being met. In the past that hasn't been the case, quite frankly, in terms of the percentage of inspections that have taken place. But we've set ambitious targets in that regard and we've put the resources in place to make it happen.
The assurances, Minister, you've given about in relation to the residents being rehoused. But the reality is, and you mentioned there about inspection, it's your own governments for the last 7.5 years that slashed the numbers of local authority fire safety inspectors. I mean, it's been estimated, as you know, and the Minister there beside you knows, that we need to quadruple the number, at least 4 times the numbers of fire safety officers in this country over the next number of years, and perhaps have up to 300 personnel. I think what really infuriates people, as you know, Taoiseach, is that some of the developers of these shoddy and dangerous buildings during the Celtic Tiger boom, as I said, under the regulations brought in by the Fianna Fáil government, what really greatly irritates them is to see the same developers having been helped by NAMA and by ourselves back in business and building away again. And surely in relation to the building control bill that's coming, that's had pre-legislative assessment, that's an issue that should be directly addressed. And can I just ask you finally, just a final point in relation to Volume 1 of Part B, which you'll be familiar with as a former Minister of the Fire Safety Regulations Minister, that relates to public buildings like schools, nursing homes, offices and so on. When will the revision of that be available to the House?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Yeah, that revision is due shortly, I'm told. In relation to inspections and inspection capacity, there is a €10 million new inspection fund that will be available to fund local authorities to make sure that they have the staffing complement needed to be able to undertake an appropriate level of inspections. The figures in the past have been in the low single digits in terms of percentage of properties that have been inspected. And where we want to get to is that about 25% of properties would be inspected each year, which is a dramatic increase, which obviously involves more staff, more resources and more focus from local authorities, but we are providing the funding to deliver on that.